Superman Last Son of Krypton by Elliot S. Magen. Chapter 8, The Power. Nobody heard the whistling in the city sky until it was all over. This was business. There were 3 gliders still in formation, heading in a wedge over Midtown. 9 more were at a standstill 15 to 20 feet over the roofs of 9 major banks, each hovering under the power of a trio of small rotors on the points of the triangular kites. Waves of infrasound beat downward from little plastic boxes on the pilot's legs. The one-man craft were masterpieces of simple design and fuel conservation. There was only one technician in the world with the talent and resources to design and build a squad of them. The pilots of the vehicles wore heavily padded outfits along with helmets that had a small monopole antenna over the left ear. Police helicopters, 4 of them, beat onto the scene with loudspeakers blasting. "Attention! Land your craft on the roof of the nearest building!" The 3 pilots in the 3 gliders, still soaring toward their respective destinations, laughed. They were the Queen's Clipper ships against the Spanish Armada. They rode stallions while the police chased on the backs of dinosaurs. "No charges will be pressed if you debark immediately!" One of the 3 glider pilots banked left toward the Banco Internazionale building. His vehicle vanished, and he found himself hanging 80 feet over the sidewalk, and he told himself he was going to die. "If you do not cease unauthorized activity within 10 seconds!" The doomed pilot looked at the spinning sky and saw that the pilots of the 2 other gliders in his formation were following him down, and their gliders were nowhere in sight. He looked down, and in the time since he last saw the ground, a huge red cloth had been stretched over the street with 2 corners tied around 2 lampposts. "You will be fired upon!" Plop, plop, plop. The pilot fell on the red cloth, and the 2 others followed. He was alive. The cloth gave way like a trampoline. He rolled across a red valley, felt himself bump into one of the other pilots, and tried to get to his knees. He felt nauseated. "You have 10 seconds!" He saw the far ends of the cloth and what was holding on to the corners there. The man in blue. He felt the surface below him give way like a beach blanket, and he was thrown by an irresistible wave against the sky, and several times the pressure of normal gravity mashed his face in. "Starting now!" Superman calculated that the force with which he flung the 3 men into the air put their initial velocity at 160 feet per second. They would rise 400 feet into the sky, and it would take them 5 seconds going up and 5 dropping back down. These thoughts flew through his head as he untied the corners of his red cape from the lamppost and fastened the clips inside his shirt, and the cloth snapped back to its normal size, and the helicopter loudspeakers filled the air. 9 seconds! Superman directed a narrow blast of air between his 2 front teeth. A block away, one of the 3 rotors keeping the glider stable began to spin too fast. The front end of the craft nosed down, dropping the pilot out. A red and blue streak drew a parabolic curve under the glider as Superman snatched the falling criminal from his fall. 8 seconds! As he swooped through the sky, the last son of Krypton threw a glance in the direction of a glider hovering over another bank building less than a block away. Banks were thicker in Midtown than Cadillacs in Tehran. It was more than a glance that Superman shot at the glider. Its pilot fell unsteadily. He looked up and saw his fiberglass kite crackling with intense heat over his head. It was bubbling, becoming disfigured into little globules of molten silicon that could not hold the wind, much less the pilot. As the craft began sailing into the nearest street, the pilot made a whirling leap at the bank roof, hoping to land on a particularly padded part of his suit. He didn't land at all. 7 seconds! The flying man carried his 2 charges by their padded trousers up toward a high ledge of the Galaxy building and set them down. The ledge was at the level of the building's air conditioner system, so the only way off was by air. On the way down, Superman went into a 300-foot power dive at his new targets, his arms flung behind him like the wings of a falcon. 6 seconds! He swept between 2 gliders and over 2 adjacent buildings at a speed just under Mach 1. The reduced air pressure in his wake dragged the 2 of them together before they could think. A blast of heat vision. Superman tossed back his shoulder, fused the roof doors of the adjoining buildings closed. These 2 would have nowhere to escape. 5 seconds! The lunchtime crowd on the street hadn't yet figured out what was going on overhead, and an irresistible force came barreling out of the sky at the thronged plaza faster than any eye could possibly follow. He banked toward a scrawny tree standing on the sidewalk in a 4-foot round concrete flower pit. Arching upward, he snatched the plant with him, pot and all. By the time he was 6 stories above the ground, he was moving slowly enough so that the pilot of the glider above could see him coming. 4 seconds! 7 down out of the dozen. The 8th knew what was coming and couldn't get out of the way. His kite was about to get caught in a tree. Superman pronged his prize like a jouster and continued upward to drop the pilot with the other 2 on the Galaxy building ledge. 3 seconds! X-ray vision beamed at the earpiece of one pilot filled his head with hellish static. An ultrasonic squeal at the highest D-flat Superman could reach was the right pitch to vibrate another pilot's footrests and handlebars out of his grip. One of the 2 realized that they were disoriented. They would fall to the roofs 15 feet below them. 2 seconds! One of the last 2 pilots was a few blocks away. He could hear the police loudspeakers playing Town Crier and feel the diminishing of the vibrations his friends were sending at their assigned bank buildings. He had reached one hand down to a boot holster and was taking aim at the nearest police helicopter. Superman caught the 322 shells in his mouth like jelly beans and spat them out at the 3 guy lines connecting the pilot to his kite. Bing, bing, bing! The pilot was unconscious on his back. 1 second! Superman quickly inspected the earphone attachments on the pilots with telescopic and X-ray vision. He had to be sure it was Luthor behind them. He threw his voice, disguised as Luthor's, the way it would sound through a radio, at the left ear of the last remaining pilot. "Scrub the mission! Surrender to the police according to our contingency plan," said Luthor's voice. 0! Swinging over the city for the benefit of those on the ground, who were finally catching on to what was taking place, the Man of Steel caught one at a time the 3 pilots tossed into the air 10 seconds ago. They were mercifully unconscious. And when the police in the 4 helicopters went to open fire, they found, to their surprise, that there wasn't a glider left in the sky. They would collect 3 suspects from a ledge of the Galaxy building, 3 unconscious under a potted tree on the plaza, 2 in a pile of crashed fiberglass on the roof, and so forth, each armed with a .22 caliber pistol whose firing pin was melted like grilled cheese. Janet Terry, the new girl in the newsroom, had the presence of mind to get a camera at the window and catch the tail of Superman's performance. Someone always did. By the time Clark Kent walked into the newsroom with a detailed account, the place was a volcano of activity. Lombard was in a corner of the room with his feet on the desk, smiling as somebody frantically answered the phone, and somebody bit a pencil in half as the bulletin came over the news wire, and somebody pounded out new copy, and somebody demanded that at least one phone line be kept free. Steve had nothing to do until his interview subject showed up. "Steve, will you talk to me?" Clark asked. "I'll tell you anything you want to hear. What's going on here?" "Jimmy called up from Princeton and everybody went bazonkas." "Why? Did you get Superman on film?" Sure. Hey, do you have any idea why he always manages to pick the emergency that's going on near a TV camera? Will you stop it? What did Jimmy say?" "Well, you see, it seems there's a big joke on Superman." "Superman? Joke?" "Yeah, well, Luthor's guys were keeping him busy playing tag. The boss went down to Princeton, stealing the papers from Albert Einstein's vault. Pretty funny, huh?" "He what?" "Stole the papers from Einstein. You don't hear too good, do you, Clarky?" And that is the end of Chapter 8. Kind of a fun chapter, an action chapter. Now, I have never read this book before, so I was, trying to imagine what was going on while I was reading it. I don't know how great of a job I did. Did that scene make sense to you, the description of Superman catching all of the glider pilots? If so, let me know. If not, say what worked for you and what didn't, and that could be what the author did, and that could also be how I read it. I will see you in the next video.